This was the first speech that Carney gave publicly since his speech in Davos, which has attracted so much world attention and provoked what seems like an irked response from President Donald Trump. That speech to the World Economic Forum talked a lot about the need for so-called middle powers, countries like Canada that aren't big, giant superpowers, to work together on security, on trade, economics. The speech he gave today kind of picked up on some of those themes, but was really kind of targeted more domestically. Think of this as the domestic version of the international speech he gave in Davos, and he really did sort of begin his speech playing off on the location. We're here at the Citadel de Quebec, which is right on this hill at the top of Quebec City, and has been since the 17th century a key military installation built up by the British in the 19th century after they took the territory from the French at the Plains of Abraham. Carney referring to that, talking about how the soil was soaked in blood not too far from here, but then he sort of pivoted and talked about how the founding nations of Canada, that is the French, the English, and the Indigenous, all kind of came together to build the country we have now, built on these Canadian values. I'll give you a little sample of what Mark Carney had to say just moments ago.
First is to be a bastion. The second is to be a beacon, an example to a world that's at sea. In a time of rising populism and ethnic nationalism, Canada can show how diversity is a strength, not a weakness. In a time of democratic decline, we can show how rights can be protected and equal freedoms endure. And in a time of rising walls and thickening borders, we can demonstrate how a country can be both open and secure, welcoming and strong, principled and powerful.
Now, usually when Mark Carney gives one of these big, long speeches, his office gives journalists an advance copy of it, and it always comes with the warning, check against delivery, which means you got to read it carefully as he's reading it to make sure he says what was written on the page. And in this case, right at the end of the speech, there was a key change that looks like the Prime Minister improvised there, talking about how Canada does not need the U.S. to live, and that Canada is Canada because we are Canadians and we adhere to these values. It was sort of an interesting line that he seems to have thrown in shortly before he delivered that speech, and pretty clearly in response to some of the pushback coming from members of the Trump administration, including President Donald Trump yesterday in Davos, who gave that speech. And today, new comments from Howard Lutnick, who is the U.S. Secretary of the Commerce Secretary, who was really involved in the tariffs and negotiations over those tariffs with Canada. Listen to what Lutnick said in this interview with Bloomberg Television about Canada and our trade relationship.
If they continue this path, right, which is a political path of a certain thing. I'm going to go fly to China. I'm going to open up my markets to China. I'm going to take Chinese electric cars and do all sorts of this stuff. Then when USMCA gets renegotiated, do you think the President of the United States is going to say, you should keep having the second best deal in the world? I mean, you guys are such great friends. I mean, they are playing with a set of rules that they haven't really thought through.
Now, in that interview, Lutnick also accused Canada of arrogance, saying we already have the best trade relationship of any country save for Mexico. He thought the Mexico arrangement within the USMCA CUSMA deal is better, I guess, because they are a larger, in terms of dollar value, the trade between Mexico and the United States is bigger than we trade with the U.S. But very clear from Lutnick that he believes that Carney going to China, striking this deal to allow them to bring a limited number, 49,000 of Chinese-made electric vehicles into the Canadian market, will have an effect on Trump and his thinking as we head into this process. It's supposed to begin this summer. It may begin earlier for the review process of the USMCA trade agreement. This is not a good sign, and I believe, Faiza, this is something that very likely today in these meetings with his cabinet, the Prime Minister is discussing how best to respond to this and what Canada can do to kind of ensure we come out of this review process with the best possible deal on the USMCA, and also to assuage fears expressed here, including by Ontario Premier Doug Ford, that this deal to bring in these Chinese vehicles is going to cause job losses and further hold back what is a fledgling EV industry here in the province. Faiza.